This is not the United States' war. This war is not being waged on behalf of American national security objectives to make the United States safer or richer.
My own feeling is no one should have to die for a foreign country. Our government's job is not to look out for Iran or for Israel. It's to look out for us.
I don't like the mullahs, but this is supposed to be America first. We're not supposed to be running around doing this anymore.
Now we turn to the policy in the Middle East directly. The president says he may be open to supporting militia groups in Iran taking up arms to dislodge the regime, which is both a tacit acknowledgement that so far the killing of Khomeini has not changed how Iran runs yet. The Wall Street Journal reporting on that, which also raises questions about what our plans are. Meanwhile, an Iranian drone hit the American consulate in Dubai. There you can see the impact, the smoke and fire rising. After the attack, U.S. officials did say they were able to account for all personnel. The Pentagon also releasing video of U.S. airstrikes on Iran's mobile missile launchers. All this amid growing scrutiny on what Trump's rationale for war is and if it keeps changing depending on the day or who's talking. Trump has said that he felt Iran would launch attacks soon. That's part of why he moved first, which is kind of a preemptive attack argument. U.S. intelligence assessments have indicated there was not a looming or preemptive strike expected from Iran, at least according to what we knew. That's the latest in several justifications.
Our objective is to defend the American people and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat.
The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles.
He wanted to make sure that Iran could never have a nuclear weapon.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action, the threat posed by their Navy. We hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government.
This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change.
If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that.
Back with us now is Ambassador Dennis Ross, a longtime Middle East expert. He served as a peace negotiator and a diplomat across several administrations, working in the Obama administration. There you can see him in the Oval Office with the president and the Secretary of State at the time. We also want to remind everyone, when you think about how long this history runs, on the left you see Bibi Netanyahu, who is back again, the leader of Israel, and you have him there with Yasser Arafat and Ambassador Ross all the way back in 1997. We should mention his latest book on the region, Statecraft 2.0, What America Needs to Learn in a Multipolar World, is available now. Welcome back. You remember that photo, that moment?
Yeah, I've just changed a little bit, not much.
Yeah, well, that's the passage of time is something we all have in common, even across the great barrier that separated those two men and their peoples. But I show that because you've lived through so much of this. The last time you were here, we discussed some of what might actually change on the sort of chessboard. And I'm curious how that compares with the way the administration is talking about it, which each day floats different reasons for what we're doing.
I think one of the hardest things to come to grips with is what you're raising. What is the objective here? You know, good statecraft is always characterized by you marry your objectives and means. Now, you can't really marry means to objectives unless the objectives themselves are clear. So thinking through the objectives is really important. We keep getting a different explanation for what the objective is. We just rehearsed, as I was watching, all these different accounts. Now, it may be that President Trump deliberately wants to keep the definition of objectives quite fluid because it frees him up to basically decide on his own at a certain point, okay, I will define the objective after the war is over and I can claim that we succeeded. That's very possible. It may account for why no one seems to be able to give you one clear objective, and the president himself seems to emphasize different points at different times.
And I'll jump in to say that the question there then becomes, is that for substance, negotiators like a certain amount of flexibility and you actually get a good outcome, or is it for PR, which is something that this former reality show host, now president, is versed in? Because When Vietnam didn't go the way successive administrations wanted, there was the old saying, declare victory and leave, which was a face-saving spin, but didn't mean that it was worth the blood or treasure or that we had a good outcome.
Look, it's very possible that the president could be in a position quite soon to claim the following. The president said that if they killed a lot of their citizens, they would pay a price. In this case, Khamenei paid the price. And I also said they wouldn't be in a position where they could threaten any of their neighbors. And I put them in a position where they can't threaten any of their neighbors. He could actually adopt a unilateral position along those lines and say, if they continue to fire, then they'll pay a much bigger price, but we've achieved our objective. Now, the irony is it would be easier to make that case if that had been the objective from the beginning. If you are waiting to explain your objective until after it's over, because you think that allows you to present this in the best possible light, it unfortunately puts you in a position where the expectations you've generated don't necessarily match what you're now saying. That's why I say you really want to be quite clear on the objectives you have in mind, not only for the reasons, Ari, that you're saying. You want to sell it to the American public. If you're never explaining what the objective is, you're raising doubts among the American public. Well, what is this about? What is the purpose here? Why are we doing it? It actually makes it harder to sustain domestic political support for what you're doing. The fact is, what we're doing right now is clearly designed to weaken the regime. The other night when I was on with you, I said, I think the objective is probably regime weakening, not regime change. And I still think that's probably what it is. And it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it's a lot easier to sell that. And I mean that in a positive way, if you're clear about it. But if you're not going to be clear about it, then it leaves it up to everybody to try to imagine. Well, what is this really about? And when people begin to imagine, then they begin to look for conspiracy theories. And that's never a particularly healthy thing.
Yeah, and the president hasn't been clear about those lines because of his style, if you want to call it that diplomatically. He muses about things. He says, well, the next leader, hopefully be better, or it could be as bad. Take a look to the president musing.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody.
And he goes on to say, the next person, we just hope they're not as bad as the previous person. I'm curious your reaction to that. And then in the limited time we have, when you talk about the weakening, do you have a sense, we showed your long history in the region, your time dealing with both parties. We got a lot of people who talk about all this stuff and have never been anywhere. You've done this for 40 years, and you talked to Arafat and Netanyahu and Likud and the cutout groups and the Hamas intermediaries. Do you have a sense yet of how it plays in the region around Iran, where groups and other states that viewed it as this tyrannical, terror-supporting, mighty nation regionally, maybe not compared to the U.S. or Russia, but regionally, are watching it going, was it never as strong as they thought? Or is it too early to read the region that way?
I'm not sure it's too early to read the region that way. I think, in fact, the region before this, nobody actually wanted. I know there's some nuance, there's some discussions of what the Saudis really wanted. I think the Saudis, given their preference, would have preferred calm. But if they felt we were going to engage in a conflict, then they wanted us to be decisive in terms of what we did. The region, I can tell you for sure, is always worried we're going to start something, then leave with them being exposed. So their attitude in advance was we prefer it to be calm. Now, what's most striking is Iran has made a bet. Iran believed that they could put pressure on the Gulf states, who would then put pressure on us to stop. What they've done by not just hitting American bases in these countries, but by hitting all sorts of civilian targets, is they've turned all these countries that would have preferred to stay out of this, they've now put them in a position where they're prepared increasingly, I think, not just to defend themselves with our help, which we are doing with them because we have Central Command and a lot of this has been rehearsed with them, but they appear prepared to actually take offensive action in response to what the Iranians are doing. The Iranians, in other words, have succeeded in creating a much stronger coalescence among the Gulf states. We had a effect, I don't want to trivialize it, but we had a feud between Saudi Arabia and the UAE going on. There were clashes between them, and that's gone now. Now that relationship has been cemented again because of Iran. So Iran has succeeded not only in bringing everybody together, but think about it. This is a U.S.-Israeli operation, the first one in history. And we have the Gulf states who are prepared to join with it. Now that's a really interesting realignment in the region, and that's thanks to the strategy that the Iranians have adopted. Just one comment on the first part of the question. My reaction to the president talking about the people we might have talked to are all dead. Well, we had the ability to target them. If we were planning to talk to some of them, well, why would you target those? If you have in mind a strategy for who you're prepared to deal with afterwards, well, then presumably, A, you have some context to them, even if it's indirect, and B, the one thing you want to be sure of is you don't go after them. So it looks to me as if maybe we had this in mind, but we didn't really connect the dots in terms of our strategy, so we've made it more difficult to determine what comes next.
The debate over America's role in the escalating conflict with Iran is no longer confined to foreign capitals. It has become a defining political question at home. Critics argue this is not a war rooted in direct American national security needs. They frame it as a departure from the America First doctrine, questioning whether U.S. forces should risk lives in a conflict that may primarily serve foreign interests. At the same time, the battlefield realities continue to unfold. Reports of possible U.S. support for Iranian militias suggest the scope of involvement could expand beyond direct strikes. Meanwhile, dramatic footage of an Iranian drone hitting the American consulate in Dubai, followed by Pentagon-released video of U.S. airstrikes, underscores how quickly this confrontation has intensified. The administration maintains that its actions are defensive and preemptive. The president has cited threats of future missile attacks, potential nuclear ambitions, and the need to eliminate short-range ballistic capabilities. Yet the stated objectives have appeared to shift from deterrence to prevention to weakening the regime while stopping short of officially calling it regime change. That lack of clarity has drawn scrutiny from foreign policy experts. Ambassador Dennis Ross, a veteran negotiator with decades of experience in the region, points out that successful statecraft requires clearly defined objectives matched with appropriate means. Without that clarity, public support can erode, and expectations can become misaligned with outcomes. Complicating matters further are the president's own remarks about Iranian leadership figures being dead and uncertainty over who comes next. Such comments raise questions about post-conflict strategy and long-term planning. But beyond Washington, a significant regional shift may already be underway. According to Ross, Iran's strategy of pressuring Gulf states may have backfired. Rather than driving a wedge between the United States and its regional partners, Iranian strikes on civilian and military targets appear to be strengthening coordination among Gulf nations. For the first time, what is described as a U.S.-Israeli operation is seeing open alignment from Gulf states, a development that could reshape Middle East geopolitics. As the conflict continues, the central question remains unresolved. What is the ultimate objective? Is it deterrence, regime weakening, or something broader? The answer may determine not only the trajectory of this conflict, but America's role in the region for years to come.